And next up, I'm very happy to introduce Ted Nelson. I'll just take a second to set up his machine. I'll get it on too. You can just start talking. But I have to move it up.
Well, okay. So I can't read what I was going to say since it's behind me. Does this on? Yeah. You can read it. We have been convinced, the world has been convinced by Xerox PARC and its diaspora that the purpose of computers is to simulate paper with all its decorations. Whereas the originator of electronic documents, Douglas Engelbart, was concerned about structure and forms of collaboration, linkage, and not just the trivial one-way links of the web. And all of those disappeared with the sudden triumph of the Xerox PARC model called the modern GUI. I prefer to call it the PUI, or PARC User Interface, which essentially is a fig leaf over the operating system, which, like most fig leaves, prevents access. And it's also an iron jockstrap because it prevents anything which is not allowed within that interface. So that the computer was dumbed down at that time, and the Xerox PARC system was imitated by Apple and by Microsoft, and henceafter by Linux, and so that's where everybody is right now. So their model of documents is the simulation of paper, rectangles, organizing things into rectangular presentations, and an obsession with the prettiness of lettering. Now, I love fonts. I designed my own font in college, but I believe that structure is far more important, just as the mind is more important than the hairdresser. Now here, this is the only working demo I have. Okay. This is the working demo I have. We paid the guy a lot of money for a cross-platform application and instead got a Windows-only demo, which we've been trying to get fixed for quite a while, but here it is. This is the kind of document I'm talking about. We're talking about parallelism of documents. Documents do not exist in isolation, yet we represent them in isolation. The doc format, the text format, the PDF are all by themselves. Where are the connections? We want to be able to see and follow the connections, and this is how I mean it. I'll worry about it. They can hear me. I can project. I can project.
No, that's the problem is that they're trying to record it, so you really do need the microphones.
I don't believe you, but oh, all right. Here we have a flight of documents visibly connected. Here are the connections when they're stretched like rubber bands, and here are the connections when we see them up close. So we have 2 pages. This is only one possible visualization. You see, along with the Xerox PARC propaganda of font representation of the costume party of pretty typefaces, came the phrase WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Meaning literally, what you see is what you get when you print it out. Yes, friends, this phrase WYSIWYG is propaganda for believing that that the purpose of documents is to create a paper simulation. Whereas if we have deeper structure that can't be printed on paper, our slogan is WYSIWYNK, what you see is what you never could. So this is only one visualization. In this particular visualization, we have two pages here. On the left, we see something I wrote for this occasion, and on the right, we see the origin of this quotation, because every quotation should be visibly and immediately connectable to its source. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and that is from the King James Bible translation. Go down to the next quotation. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight, and that is from the alphabet of Ben Sira. And as we step through the successive connections, and we have both links and transclusions here, I don't have time to explain, we see the successive connections, the pages successively connected, leaping up to be next to wherever they should be next to. Now that that is the essence of what I'm talking about, and I'll go on from there. So I don't even have access to the script. Yeah, well, I don't want them to see that. Okay. Right. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. So they don't see nothing. All right, fine. So parallel pages. That's what I'm here to talk about. The representation, the visible representation of parallelizable structure of every kind. Parallel pages for representing parallel content. For example, history. What was happening in Germany? What was happening in England? What was happening in South America at the same time? Should be not in successive chapters. They should be in parallel pages. Comments should be on the side. Footnotes should be on the side. There is intrinsic parallelism of structure. There is intrinsic parallelism of content. And so these should be corresponding parts of documents. Outlines should be on the side. For programming, you should have the specs next to the code, next to the bug list, and be able to traverse each of these steps. Because as I showed you, the, the parallel connection is also a bridge for the reader or next author to move between the successive representation. As a workflow system, you see, Xerox PARC gave us the pretty pages, but where do we put the content that hasn't gone on them yet? And where do we put the stuff we might use and think might be out but might not be? And where do we put the comments that may go somewhere but we're not sure? They didn't leave us any place to put those, except, of course, in the hierarchical directories in other paper representations. And they gave us that magnificent structure, the so-called clipboard. This is a, quote, metaphor. You see, the clipboard, where you do your Control X and Control V and Control whatever. The clipboard is just like any physical clipboard, except you can't see it. It only holds one object, and whatever you put on it destroys the previous object. Now, in every other respect, it resembles a physical clipboard, except there aren't any other respects. And the term clipboard is simply a propaganda term to make people accept this abominable mechanism, this tiny keyhole for the management of content, which destroys 1 million objects every day as people answer the phone and forget what they've got stored on it. And the person responsible for this misnomer is my friend Larry Tesler, because unfortunately, the people at Xerox PARC were idealists too. They just had a very shallow notion of human potentiality. Doug Engelbart had a great notion of human potentiality. He believed that people could expand, to human understanding and ability to work could be expanded exponentially. Well, I'm much more cynical, but I believe it could be a lot smarter than our current tools are making us. So we need workflow with version management. We need versions parallel, side by side, to see the differences. We need workflow for with a forkable undo chain. We need workflow for collaborative environments. We need to keep track of who wrote which part and when. And where does that show up? Well, you know, Microsoft Word has these little thingies for doing that. That's enough for most lawyers, right? But giving us decent text tools with access to the original content, access to the original sources of everything, access to the parallelisms intrinsic in the documents we create, because the kinds of documents I'm trying to create will be intrinsically parallel. I don't want to write any other kind of document ever, and it makes me sick every day to have to use today's tools. And believe me, I've been on this long enough to be much angrier than I look. So the simple structure is A, indirect documents, meaning that a document is represented by a list of pieces to bring in. B, this is then overlaid with xanalinks. I use that term only to make it absolutely clear we're not talking about web links. A xanalink is a multifaceted connector of arbitrary type. And the xanalinks are published separately so that they may be reused in other documents. I'll just keep it simple. Why do I keep at this? A, because I still believe in the world I first imagined. B, I believe I will have the last laugh and hope to live long enough for it when people finally come to understand in an integrated view the true nature of thought, the true nature of writing, the true nature of the writing process, the true nature of ongoing work, which goes on and on and on and on in unfinished and partial structures, the true nature of collaboration, the true nature of publication, the true nature of posterity, and thus the true and destined nature of documents. Thank you very much.